5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again to all the witnesses. Great to hear from many of you. First off, Ms. Roman, there's been a lot of talk about voter turnout. And again, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I think it's tragic that we don't talk about the good things we're doing in this country that led to historic midterm turnout in 2018 and in 2020 across all demographics. Instead, we talk about what divides us and what could lead to lower turnout in the midst of historic turnout. Now, taking a look back at history, I know you mentioned some historical facts during your opening statements, Ms. Roman. I want to ask you a quick question. Was voter turnout, did we lose her? Impeccable timing. There you go. You back?
I'm back.
Ms. Roman? Okay. With the initial Voting Rights Act that passed with Republicans leading that in the 60s, could you tell us if voter turnout was used as part of maybe determining what a covered jurisdiction would be? I'll go ahead and answer for her if she keeps losing her.
Okay, there, I heard you this time. Could you just repeat the question quickly? I'm sorry.
Was voter turnout utilized in the initial Voting Rights Act to determine what covered jurisdictions would be covered under?
I am not aware whether it was or not. I'm sorry.
It was. It was the main driver of the voter turnout for the presidential race in 1964 was utilized. So voter turnout has been part of determining what works and what doesn't work. Actually, let me move on to Ms. Centeno. And Ms. Centeno, I appreciate your work that you're doing on behalf of Latino voters all throughout the country. And it's not just about voter turnout, it's about having a Latino representation, right, in Congress. Is that true?
So that's one, sorry. In terms of voting rights in general, representation is certainly one thing that MALDEF works to increase through the litigation that we bring, that may be through litigation against at-large systems or discriminatory redistricting, or in other instances, other cases that deal with the ability to elect. So representation is one aspect of that, but when we're talking about voter ID laws and ballot proof of citizenship requirements, really the focus there is the studies and evidence that show that Latinos are hampered by their ability to cast their ballots because of these restrictions.
Well, we've seen historic turnout and historic voter participation graphics, and I certainly hope that continues. And I certainly hope that MALDEF plays a role in touting some of the successes. And as you look ahead, though, redistricting is coming up. I hope MALDEF's concerned about a lack of Hispanic representation, maybe in states like Illinois. Are you engaged, or is your organization engaged to ensure that the growth of Latino voting population in my home state of Illinois is part of a possible new congressional seat, since Hispanics are clearly underrepresented in the Illinois congressional delegation?
So MALDEF does engage in redistricting public education, and when necessary, will engage in litigation to address redistricting plans that are discriminatory. And so MALDEF does have a regional office in Illinois, and we are engaged in public education efforts to make sure that community members are aware of the redistricting process, how it works, and how they can be engaging and advocating for their own communities as Illinois and local jurisdictions redraw their district lines. And that's an activity that we engage in across the country in many different locations, including Texas and California. And we'll be engaging with our partners on the ground to make sure that community members are empowered with information. But in addition to all of that work, yes, where necessary, MALDEF does bring litigation when redistricting plans are discriminatory.
Would you consider it necessary to have a lawsuit or put forth litigation if there's one Hispanic member of Congress from the state of Illinois with, I believe I've heard the statistic, 40% increase over the last decade of voting age Latinos, and only one Hispanic district?
I think it would certainly be too early for us to commit to what we might do in terms of litigation or litigation strategy with respect to a redistricting plan in Illinois. Even in the scenario that you have just described to me, we obviously would take it under consideration and look closely at what that districting plan looks like and how it included or how it addressed the Latino community throughout Illinois and in those pockets where there are significant Latino populations.
Yeah, we'll look very closely too at equal representation of litigation in Democratic versus Republican-led redistricting states too. Thank you again for your responses. Thanks to everyone, and Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis, and thank you, Rodney, for making reference to the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I remember it so very well. I had just finished high school a few weeks before the VRA was passed. And as I recall, one of the most significant parts of the VRA, as you said, was that the legislation was bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans came together and passed the VRA. It was supported and demanded actually by President Lyndon B. Johnson at the time, right after the Selma to Montgomery massacre. So thank you for bringing that up. I looked it up a moment ago. It looks like only 74 members of the House voted against it. 328 members supported it on August 3rd, 1965. So thank you for mentioning that fact. It's something we're very proud of. At this time, the chair will recognize the gentlelady from the suburbs of